My name is Enrico Trevisani, appearing on behalf of the plaintiff, Cam Donaldson. Today I'm joined by my co-counsel.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Jack Ayers on behalf of the plaintiff, Cam Donaldson.
Thank you. And for the defense?
Good evening, Your Honor. Ryan New on behalf of the defense, Ms. Karen Baja.
Good evening, Your Honor. Ellen Barron on behalf of the defense.
All right, thank you to you all. The next step in our process, we've dispensed with the conflicts check, and I've determined, as have all the jurors, that there's not a conflict that prevents us from proceeding. Make sure that none of us have been summoned to appear in another courtroom because of a conflict somewhere else. It is, looks like we are okay. And so we're going to go ahead and proceed.
Your Honor, also on screen is Cameron Donaldson, Lou Donaldson's daughter. Today she's suing both individually and as the representative of the estate. May she come on screen and introduce herself?
Yeah, that's fine.
Hello, my name's Cameron Donaldson.
Hi, Ms. Donaldson. All right. Are the plaintiffs, are you ready to proceed with this matter?
Yes, Your Honor. We're ready to proceed.
And is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. We're going to begin with the swearing in, so I'm going to ask everyone to begin by raising your right hand, witnesses and attorneys. You don't need to turn on your camera if you're not on camera. That's fine. Please indicate by saying "I do" if you swear to abide by the rule of this proceeding and conduct yourself in a manner that is honorable to this forum.
I do.
I do.
I do.
All right. For the record, the court heard everybody acknowledge that oath. We'll now officially call the case 082263 Cam Donaldson versus Karen Baja. We've already done entries of appearances, so I'm going to begin with some preliminary matters, and I'll look first to the plaintiff for any preliminary matters that we need to address.
Yes, Your Honor. First, we would just ask Your Honor for constructive sidebar, since in this virtual format, there's no way for us to approach the bench. We would ask that all objection arguments could be constructively heard outside the earshot of the jury.
I'm not going to grant that. If you needed a sidebar, you need to ask for it. You know, there are times when that's appropriate, certainly, but I expect that everyone here is seasoned counsel and can advise the court of the nature of an objection without needing to taint the jury. There may be circumstances, obviously, where that's required, and you can certainly ask at that time.
Yes, Your Honor. We also understand that you've received an electronic notebook of all the documents and exhibits. We just wanted to confirm that that was the case.
That is the case. I have received all of the exhibits, a number of previous pleadings, and so I do have an entire copy of the record with me.
Yes, Your Honor. With that, we're ready to proceed. We have no motions that we'll be offering in limine.
All right, let me turn next to the defense first for any preliminary matters you wish to address.
Your Honor, we have no additional housekeeping matters.
All right, are there any substantive motions from the defense? My understanding is there are not from the plaintiff. I would go there first, but anything else the defense would like to address before we proceed to opening statements?
Your Honor, we have met with the plaintiff's counsel before this trial, and both parties have agreed to stipulate that any evidence regarding Exotic Bob and any of his statements will be inadmissible. In addition, both parties have agreed that any evidence related to a transponder will also be inadmissible.
All right, and counsel, for whoever would like to address that on the plaintiff, is that a correct or accurate recitation of the stipulation y'all have reached?
Yes, Your Honor. We're happy for you to enter those stipulations onto the record.
All right, I will receive those additional stipulations, and I appreciate the parties communicating about that ahead of time. Are there any further matters we need to address prior to opening statement?
No, Your Honor. The plaintiff is ready to proceed.
And the defense?
We are ready as well, Your Honor.
All right. I do want to address just a couple of procedural matters that are the preference of this court in terms of the opening statements and closing arguments. This may be consistent with what you've experienced in other courtrooms in this jurisdiction, but particularly for opening and closing, it's the court's preference that everyone who isn't speaking turn off their camera and obviously mute your microphone. If you need to make an objection, you can obviously turn on your camera and make that objection. It's not a prohibition, or it's not meant to chill your ability to make an objection, but that allows the members of the court to fully see and appreciate the subtleties of what you all are presenting. I will certainly be turning off my camera during those statements as well, but for the duration of the trial and witness examinations, my camera will remain on. My request is that each attorney, both the direct and cross-examining attorney for each witness, just leave their camera on for both sides of that examination of the witness. So are there any questions about that procedure? All right, seeing a lot of nods. So with that, we'll go ahead and begin with our opening statement, and we'll turn to the plaintiff for that. You may begin when you're ready, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. He threatened divorce. She made him disappear. Let's go back to a hot, sticky day in August of 2012. Lou Donaldson is sitting in his office with his wife, Karen. He says, "Karen, we need to talk." He tells her that their marriage isn't working. She pleads with him, begs him to change his mind, says, "I can change." But Lou just shakes his head. "I'm filing for divorce." She stands up out of her chair, screams, and storms out of the office. Lou Donaldson is still sitting in his chair. He's shaken, but relieved. He thinks that his marriage is about to end. He doesn't know that his life is about to end. 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after Lou Donaldson told his wife he was going to divorce her, he was gone, disappeared. The evidence will show that when Lou Donaldson left his office on August 17th of 2012, he went home, the same home that he shared with his wife. Today, the evidence will show that the defendant killed him, disposed of his body, and then waited to inherit $10 million. When he threatened divorce, she made him disappear. We represent the plaintiff in today's case, Cameron Donaldson. Lou Donaldson was her father. Today, she's suing the defendant, Karen Baja, for her father's wrongful death. We have to prove that the defendant's conduct caused Lou Donaldson to die. Today, we're going to meet that burden by proving 3 simple facts. Lou Donaldson told his wife he wanted a divorce. 2 weeks later, he was dead, and the defendant is the one that killed him. So let's take those one at a time. Fact number 1, Lou Donaldson told his wife that he was about to file for divorce. Today, you're going to learn that Lou Donaldson was a wealthy man. He owned a dealership where he sold cars. He owned multiple planes. He owned lions, tigers, and jaguars. Today, you'll learn that the defendant and Lou, they shared a life of luxury together. You'll learn that on August 3rd of 2012, the defendant learned that that was about to change. You'll hear eyewitness testimony that Lou Donaldson told his wife that he was going to file for divorce. The second fact that we're going to prove is that 2 weeks after Lou Donaldson threatened to divorce the defendant, he was dead. Cameron Donaldson's going to take that stand today. She's going to tell you that the last time she saw her father was August 17th of 2012. It was a Friday. He said, "I'm headed home. I'll see you on Monday." He didn't come back on Monday or Tuesday or any day after that. When the defendant was asked about it, she said, "Well, maybe he moved to Costa Rica." Today, the evidence will show that Lou Donaldson never moved anywhere. His clothes were still in his closet. His toothbrush was still on the sink. Not a penny was missing from his bank account. The evidence will show that Lou Donaldson was dead. The third fact that we're going to prove today is that the defendant killed her husband. We questioned the defendant under oath. We asked her, "What were you doing the night that your husband disappeared?" She said, "I met up with my brother at 3 a.m. We asked her, "Why did you go out at 3 a.m.? She said, "To buy milk." You'll learn that after the defendant went out to get milk at 3 a.m. with her brother, Lou Donaldson was never seen alive again. Now, I want to be clear. The police who investigated this case never found Lou Donaldson's body. They never found physical evidence, blood or DNA that pointed to the defendant. But today, you'll also learn that the deputy sheriff of that same department, it's the defendant's brother, Carl. Folks, some of the most important evidence that you're going to hear in today's trial is about how the defendant acted after her husband went missing. Because you'll learn that when everyone else thought that Lou Donaldson was alive, the defendant was already acting like he was dead. She never called her husband and asked, "Where are you?" She never texted her husband asking, "When are you coming home?" The evidence will show that the defendant never tried to contact her husband once after he disappeared. Instead, the evidence will show that the same weekend that her husband went missing, the defendant broke into his office, stole his financial documents, and declared that she now owned all of his property. Members of the jury, it was just over 8 years ago that Lou Donaldson thought he was about to begin a new chapter of his life. He never got that chance. That's why at the end of today's trial, we're going to ask you to find the defendant liable for his death. Because when he threatened divorce, she made him disappear. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Opening statement from the defense. Ms. Barron, you may proceed when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. We all want answers to tragic events, especially those that take away someone we love. And an answer can be finding someone else to blame, a place where we can direct our grief and anger. Cam Donaldson wants to blame Karen Baja for the disappearance of her father. Blaming someone else might be easier than accepting that accidents happen. Karen Baja suffered the loss of her husband. She didn't cause it. From what we know, Lou Donaldson was a pilot and frequently flew off the radar. He had a mistress in Costa Rica and would fly 2,200 miles each way. He disappeared on August 17th, 2012, and his van was found at an airstrip. Now, the plaintiff's attorney just painted a far more interesting story than that, a story that creates a villain in Karen. They've accused her of murdering her husband. Their story certainly finds someone to blame for Lou's disappearance. My co-counsel Ryan New and I ask that you look at the facts, look at what we actually know. So I want to tell you about Karen Baja, the person the plaintiff's attorney just said had this elaborate plan to kill her husband, cover it up, forge a will, and 5 years later collect $10 million. They vilified Karen, but the facts show a different picture. Karen loved Lou. He was her soulmate. She knew this from the night they met when he rescued her as she was hitchhiking. She loved Lou with all her heart. Now, as you've heard, even though Karen loved Lou, their marriage wasn't perfect. Lou had a mistress and he asked for a divorce at one point. But Karen thought they were working through those issues like so many other couples do. Lou and Karen had built a life together, dedicating themselves to wild wildlife, their tiger and big cat emporium. Taking care of big cats was Karen's passion and life, and that's what she was doing the night Lou disappeared. The night of August 17th, 2012. Karen was taking care of baby tiger cubs. They were a couple days old and had been rejected by their mother. Karen needed supplies, so she went out to get milk and formula for these baby cubs. Now, unfortunately, her car broke down on her way back home. So she called her brother, who was on duty as a deputy sheriff, and he was able to pick her up and drive her home. Again, this was the same night Lou disappeared. So let's talk about what we know about where Lou could be. He owned multiple planes. No one knows exactly how many. He bought and sold them all the time. He often failed to properly register them, and he would fly without logging his flight plan with the airport. He would take off at a moment's notice, and the van of his that was left at an airstrip had his glasses neatly folded in their case and his keys left on the seat. Lou never came back. His body was never found. Karen waited for him, hoping and praying that he would come back to her. Year after year, she waited for Lou to return. Now, under the law, once a person has been missing for 5 years, they can be declared legally dead. So for Karen, after holding out hope for so many years that Lou would show up, declaring him to be legally dead was the one thing that could bring her some closure. So she did so. Now, this declaration meant that Lou's life insurance claim and his will could be distributed. The proceeds from both, $10 million, went to Karen, Lou's wife. Now, that $10 million, half was from the life insurance policy and half came from Lou's estate via his will. You'll hear that Lou's daughter, Cam, doesn't think Karen should have gotten that money. She'll tell you that there was a different will that gave her a portion of Lou's estate. There's no proof of another will. It hasn't been provided to the court. No copy has been found. There's no written record indicating there's any other will than the one we have today. Instead, what we know is that Cam spent 20 years of her life being Lou's assistant at Wild Wildlife. She felt like she did it all. Cam didn't get ownership over wild wildlife after her father disappeared. Karen did. And so 1 month before Lou could be declared legally dead and his will would be read, giving wild wildlife to Karen, Cam decided to hire an investigator. You'll hear that this investigator believes Karen forged Lou's will. Let's talk about what else you'll hear about this will and Lou's signature. Chris Renard, a certified forensic document examiner with experience at the Statesville Bureau of Investigation Crime Lab, examined Lou's will. Mr. Renard has a specialty in signature identification and altered records and has reviewed hundreds of wills. He'll explain why Summit Life Insurance Company granted Ms. Baja that $5 million from Lou's life insurance claim. He looked at the will. He looked at Lou's signature. He compared Lou's signature on the will to other examples of Lou's signature, and he found sufficient similarities between all of them. In fact, many of the similarities that you may hear about from the plaintiff's own expert were in Lou's signature on the will. You'll have the opportunity to look at some of these signatures during this case. Now, Mr. Renard also had multiple conversations with Lou's friends, his family, his associates, and the people who saw him sign the will. So Mr. Renard found it was unlikely anyone tried copying this will and that it appears to be genuine. Now, on top of the idea that there's a different will, you heard the plaintiff's counsel just said, Cam thinks that Karen killed Lou. Well, there's no evidence that anyone killed Mr. Donaldson. There are no signs of a struggle, no signs of his blood anywhere, and no DNA evidence. There's nothing at his house, nothing at Wild Wildlife, and nothing in the van he left behind that indicates there was a struggle or that a murder occurred. Summit Life Insurance could have contested paying out that $5 million claim if they thought Karen had killed Lou or forged his will. Now, this is important because they had a significant economic motive to deny that claim. So Mr. Renard considered these possibilities, that Karen killed Lou or that she forged his signature. But you'll hear that they had to look at the facts just as we do today. There were no signs of foul play, no evidence of blood or a struggle. Lou's will appeared to be genuine. And ultimately, you'll hear the insurance company paid that $5 million claim. Now, while you consider the testimony you'll hear today, it's important to know that the plaintiff, Cam Donaldson, bears a burden of proof in this case. This means she must prove by a preponderance of the evidence every single element of her claim. Let's step back. Lou Donaldson's disappearance was a tragedy. Karen Baja lost her husband, her partner in saving big cats, and her soulmate. Declaring Lou to be dead was the one thing that could help bring closure and allow her to honor his memory in continuing Wild Wildlife. At the end of this case, my co-counsel, Ryan New, and I will ask that you find for Karen Baja.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. The plaintiff, you may call your first witness.
Plaintiff calls Cam Donaldson.
All right, counsel, the witness has been sworn. You may begin your examination when ready, just as soon as we get defense counsel up as well, so that, thank you, Mr. New, I appreciate that. All right, Mr. Ayers, you can proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you see and hear me okay?
I can.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Hello, my name is Cameron Donaldson.
Where do you live, Miss Donaldson?
I live here in Pioneer. I've lived here my whole life.
Did you know Lou Donaldson?
Yes,
How?
he was my dad.
Do you know the defendant, Karen Baja?
Yes, she was my stepmother, my dad's second wife.
Miss Donaldson, why did you bring this case?
In 2012, I overheard my dad tell Karen he was going to divorce her. 2 weeks later, he had disappeared. The day after Dad went missing, Karen smiled at me. She said I won. She let me know that everything my father owned was about to be hers.
Let's start at the beginning. Miss Donaldson, in your electronic notebook, can you find the document called Donaldson Deposition Exhibit 1? And let me know when you've got that in front of you.
I see it.
What is it?
It's a picture of Dad. It's my favorite photo of him. It was taken when I was younger.
Your Honor, we offer this document as Plaintiff's Exhibit 1.
Any objection?
No objection.
May we publish on screen?
Plaintiff's Exhibit 1 is admitted, and you may publish.
Now, Miss Donaldson, you said that it's been 8 years since your dad disappeared. How has that affected you?
It's hard to put into words. I miss him so much that I think about him every day.
Were the two of you close?
Very close. We had dinner together a lot. I also worked with him every day for 20 years.
What did your dad do for a living?
Dad had a business selling cars, but his real passion was animals. When he had saved up enough money, he bought a big cat sanctuary. Lions, tigers, leopards. I helped him run it.
When did your dad marry the defendant?
2001.
And you said earlier that in 2012, your dad told the defendant he wanted a divorce. When exactly was that?
It happened twice.
When was the first time?
June of 2012.
When you heard your dad in June of 2012, what exactly did he say?
He said he wanted a divorce.
How did the defendant react?
She said, if you try to divorce me, I will kill you.
When was the second time you heard your dad talk to the defendant about a divorce?
It was August 3rd, 2012.
Where were you?
We were at the office, me, Dad, and Karen.
And this time, on August 3rd, what did you hear your dad say?
He said he had made a decision. He said, I'm filing for divorce.
When your dad told the defendant that he'd made that decision and that he was filing for divorce, how did she react?
She screamed at him. She screamed at him in his office, then she stormed out.
I want to talk about what happened after your dad told the defendant that he was going to divorce her. When was the last time you saw your father?
Friday, August 17th, exactly 2 weeks later.
What time?
It was 6 p.m. He was leaving the office.
As your dad was leaving the office on August 17th, did he say anything about his upcoming plans?
Yes, he said he was going to spend the weekend at home. He said, I'll see you on Monday. Those are the last words that Dad ever said to me. I'll see you on Monday.
I want to talk about the idea that your dad just left, decided to leave the country. Now, back in 2012, did you have access to your dad's financial records?
Yes, both his business and personal accounts.
In your electronic notebook, could you find the document called Bank Account Statement and let me know when you've got it?
I have it open.
What is it?
This is Dad's bank account statement from 2012 to 2017. It covers the 5 years after I last saw him.
Your Honor, This document comes with a business record certification from the bank manager of Statesville Bank. We offer the document now into evidence as Plaintiff's Exhibit 2.
Any objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 2 is admitted.
May we publish on screen?
You may.
Mr. Trevisani, could you zoom in on the financial section of that document, please? Ms. Donaldson, what activity did this bank account show from your dad after August 17th, 2012?
None. Before that, you can see that he was making deposits or withdrawals every few days, but after August 17th, it just stopped. No deposits, no withdrawals, nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Trevisani. Now, Ms. Donaldson, I want to talk to you about something that the defense said in opening statement. They said your dad was a pilot. Is that true?
Yes, but I can't remember a time when Dad flew anywhere without telling me.
On August 17th, did he say anything about flying to Costa Rica?
No. He said, "I'll see you on Monday." He said he was going to spend the weekend at home.
Where was home for your dad?
Here in Pioneer. He lived at 5514 Collier's Drive.
Did anyone that you know of live with him?
Just Karen.
Let's talk about the defendant. Now, after you last saw your dad on August 17th, when was the next time you saw the defendant?
2 days later, August 19th at 6 a.m.
Why did you see the defendant at 6 a.m.?
The alarm went off at Dad's business. I live close by, so I just drove right over.
Can you tell the jury what you found when you arrived at the office at 6 a.m. on August 19th?
The padlock on the front gate was cut. I also saw 2 people coming out of the office.
Let's talk first about that physical damage. In your electronic notebook, could you find the documents called Donaldson Deposition Exhibit 2 and Donaldson Deposition Exhibit 3? And let me know when you found both of them.
I see both.
What's Exhibit 2?
This is a picture of the padlock on the front gate at Dad's sanctuary.
And what's Exhibit 3?
It's the gate outside the office.
Is this how that padlock and that gate looked when you arrived on August 19th?
Yes.
Your Honor, we offer the photograph of the padlock as Plaintiff's Exhibit 3.
No objection.
All right, Exhibit 3 is admitted.
And we offer the photograph of the gate as Plaintiff's Exhibit 4.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, both exhibits are admitted as Plaintiff's 3 for the padlock and 4 for the gate. And you may publish at will, counsel.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Donaldson, you said that when you arrived on August 19th, this is how that padlock and gate looked. But is that how they looked when you left the office on August 17th?
No, the lock was intact when I left on August 17th.
Thank you, Mr. Trevisani. Ms. Donaldson, you said that when you arrived on the 19th, you also saw 2 people. Did you recognize them?
The first person I didn't recognize. He was carrying a bolt cutter. The other person was Karen. She was carrying a lockbox.
Had you seen that lockbox before?
Yes, it was the lockbox from Dad's office. He kept important documents there.
And when you saw the defendant holding that lockbox, what was her demeanor?
She was smiling, ear to ear.
Did she say anything to you?
She said I won. She told me that my father was gone and that everything that Dad owned was about to be hers.
When the defendant told you that your father was gone and that everything he owned was about to be hers, how long had it been since you'd last seen your dad?
Less than 2 days, 36 hours.
Thank you, Ms. Donaldson. I have no further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
May I proceed?
You may. Mr. Ayers, I'll just ask you to go ahead and mute yourself unless you need to object. Thank you. Counsel, you may proceed.
Ms. Donaldson, I want to pick up where counsel left off with this incident with the lockbox. Now, you say that around 6 a.m. on Sunday, August 19th, the alarm went off at the Wild Wildlife office. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
You don't have a report with you showing that an alarm went off at that time, correct?
No, I didn't bring that with me. I don't have access to that.
You didn't bring a record from a security company showing that an alarm went off at that time, correct?
No.
All right, but you claim that you responded to that alarm and you drove over to the office. Is that right?
Yes, I drove right over.
And you also claim that the police drove in right behind you, correct?
They did.
You didn't bring a police report with you today to show that the police did in fact respond to an alarm that day, correct?
No, just my memory of our interactions.
So to go back to my question, you did not bring a police report of any kind showing that the police were there.
No, I didn't.
You also didn't bring any incident report of any kind showing that the police in fact did respond to an alarm and arrived at the scene, correct?
No, I don't have an incident report.
All right, but you claim that once you and the police arrived, you were walking up and Ms. Baja came out with a lockbox, correct?
Yes, along with the other gentleman that was with her.
Sure, and she had cut a lock, you say?
Yes, the padlock on the front gate was cut.
And she had destroyed a gate too, correct?
The gate in the back, yes.
That's what you claim she did. Those were the two exhibits that we saw, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Karen was a co-owner of Wild Wildlife, wasn't she?
She had access to the office, but I mean, that's why I was so surprised. Why was everything ruined if she was in fact a co-owner?
So to clarify, you're saying that Ms. Baja did have access to the office, correct?
She had points, but I mean, that's when me and my dad were there.
So now Ms. Baja, a co-owner of the Wild Wildlife Sanctuary, you say that as you're walking up, she walks out with this lockbox, right?
Yes, I saw the lockbox.
A lockbox that you claim you kept in your desk, is that right?
Yes, it was in my desk in my dad's business office.
And that desk, it was also kept in a drawer, right?
Yes, that's where the lockbox was located.
A drawer that you kept locked, right?
I did in fact keep that door locked.
And inside of that lockbox, you claim that there was a particular version of your father's will, right?
Yes, his last will and testament.
And this will, your father's last will and testament, it said what to do with all of his assets, right?
Yes, it split his assets 4 ways amongst me, my mom, Karen, and 25% going to maintain Wild Wildlife.
So let's talk about that for a second. This will that you claim existed and was in this lockbox, it left 25% of all your father's assets to you, right?
Yes, he didn't leave me everything. He left me 25%.
And you also claim that this will that was in that lockbox that Ms. Baja took, it also left 25% of your father's estate to your mother, correct?
Yes, they were on good terms. They had a good relationship.
Ms. Donaldson, I didn't ask you about their relationship. All I asked was this particular version of the will that you claim existed, it left 25% of all of your father's assets to your mother, right?
Yes, his first wife.
His first wife, right? Meaning his ex-wife, correct?
That's correct.
A woman he was no longer married to, correct?
Yes, but she was still my mother, so they had their connection in me.
Ms. Donaldson, I didn't ask you about their connection. I asked you, this was a woman in your father's will that he was no longer married to, correct?
That's correct.
All right, so now you're there with the police, and you did not ask the police to stop Ms. Baja, did you? Or excuse me, yes, to stop Ms. Baja.
The police questioned her.
And she told them that she was a co-owner, according to you, right?
Those were the words that she used.
You don't have a police report afterwards showing that you complained that she had stolen from you, correct?
No, I don't.
You don't have an incident report telling the police that they should go and recover this document, this lockbox that Ms. Baja had stolen from you, correct?
No, during their questioning, Ms. Baja went ahead and said, hey, contact my attorney.
Ms. Donaldson, I didn't ask you what Ms. Baja said. I asked you whether or not after this was all over, you did not file any report alleging anything was stolen, correct?
That's correct.
But you believed that Ms. Baja was stealing from your father's business, right?
Yes, it was a business that he started and that he maintained.
And you don't have this other version of the will that you maintain was in that lockbox with you today, correct?
No, the only copy of that will was in the lockbox that Karen took on August 19th.
You never made any copies of that particular version of the will that you claim exists?
No, I had kept it safe in an office that we had access to in a drawer that I kept locked. So no, I didn't make another copy.
According to you, then, the only copy of this version of the will that you claim existed was in that lockbox. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
But you were at the office with the police, and you did not demand that after Karen cut a lock, destroyed office property, and broke into your desk, that they collect that lockbox from her, correct?
Counsel, it was early in the morning. It was 6 a.m. I was taking everything in. You listed at least 3 pieces of evidence. I didn't exactly get the pieces together right then and there.
Now, Donaldson, I know what you wanted to get that out, but I didn't ask you that question. I didn't ask you about how you processed it. I asked you, when you were there with the police there, and Ms. Baja had just destroyed office property, according to you, and had stolen from your desk, according to you, you did not demand that the police take that lockbox from her, correct?
No, I did not.
And to this day, you have never filed any police report alleging that Ms. Baja stole anything from you, correct?
No, I haven't filed a police report.
Let's talk for a second now about the physical evidence in this case. Your father's body was never found, correct?
Unfortunately, that's correct.
You did not bring any DNA evidence confirming that Ms. Baja killed your father, correct?
That's correct.
You have never seen any DNA evidence confirming that Ms. Baja killed your father, correct?
That's correct.
And no one has ever told you that they saw any DNA evidence confirming that Ms. Baja killed your father, correct?
That's correct.
After your father disappeared, you never saw any blood on Ms. Baja, right?
No, I didn't see her until August 19th.
No one ever told you that they saw your father's blood on Ms. Baja after he disappeared, correct?
That's correct.
You never saw your father's blood on the meat grinder at the Wildlife Sanctuary after he disappeared, correct?
No, that's not something that I inspected.
So to go back to my question, you never saw your father's blood on that meat grinder after he disappeared, correct?
That's correct.
And no one ever told you that they saw your father's blood or DNA on that meat grinder, correct?
That's correct.
You've never seen your father's blood on anything at the Wildlife Reserve since he disappeared, correct?
No, I haven't seen any physical evidence.
And no one has ever told you that they've seen any physical evidence, correct?
That's correct.
All that was ever found was a pair of your father's glasses and his car keys, right?
Yes, at an airstrip that he did not hang the plane.
They were found in a van, Ms. Donaldson?
They were.
You never saw any blood on that van, correct?
No, I didn't see the van. I didn't collect it.
You never saw any blood in that van, correct?
No, I didn't collect the van from the airstrip that day.
I didn't ask you whether you collected anything. I asked you, no one told you that they've ever seen, you did not see any blood in that van, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Needlessly cumulative. This witness has already answered that she never saw any of her father's blood after August 17th, 2012.
Response?
Your Honor, this is a different question that goes directly to a specific fact that she claims that Miss Baja has planted this van there, and it goes directly to the material fact of whether or not he disappeared and how he disappeared, as to whether or not there was any blood found specifically on that van.
Objection's overruled. I understand where you're coming from, counsel, but given that there are already strict time limitations in place, absent it being essentially a repeat of a question that was already asked, and allow each side to use the time as they see fit for the most part. So your objection's noted but overruled.
Ms. Donaldson, to go back to my question, you never saw your father's blood inside that van, correct?
No, I didn't.
And no one has ever told you that they saw your father's blood in, on, or near that van, right?
That's correct.
But still, you believe Miss Baja killed your father.
My belief that Miss Baja killed my dad is based on her actions both before and after he disappeared.
Okay. And you feel so strongly about this belief that you hate her, right?
Exactly. I feel like she's responsible for my dad's death.
Miss Baja, who did in fact inherit everything from your father.
It's not that she inherited everything from my father, it's that she killed him.
I didn't ask you why. I asked you, Miss Baja did in fact inherit everything from your father, right?
She did.
You hope that Miss Baja is attacked by one of her tigers, correct?
Those are the words that I stated. I don't mean Karen any harm, but I was very angry.
Well, in your previous deposition, you're saying that you said that you hope that she's attacked by a tiger. Surely you meant at that time that she should be attacked by a tiger, right?
My words were said out of anger.
Okay. And you also hope that she's eaten by a tiger, right?
If you feel like someone's responsible for the death of someone that you hold dear, then yes, you would feel strong feelings about that.
Donaldson, I didn't ask you all those details. I asked whether you hope that Miss Baja is eaten by a tiger.
When I made my statements at the deposition, yes, I did.
Let's talk about your father's flying habits now. Your father's van was found parked at an airstrip, as you mentioned, right?
Yes, it was.
An airstrip 40 miles away, correct?
Yes, and hangars.
So you believe your father didn't hangar any planes at that airstrip?
I know he didn't.
Okay. And you also believe that he didn't fly out of that airstrip ever, right?
I do.
But you didn't fly with your father every single time he took a trip, did you?
No, Dad was an avid flyer and he liked to kind of go with the wind. So he would just fly when he felt like it.
He liked to go with the wind and fly whenever he felt like it. Now, you did not drive him to his planes every single time that he decided to take to the wind and go as he felt, right?
No, we led separate lives sometimes. And so if he wanted to go, it's not always that I wanted to accompany him.
So go back to my question. You did not drive your father to his planes every single time he flew, correct?
That's correct.
Your father owned a lot of planes, right?
He did.
In fact, you don't know exactly how many planes he owned, right?
He liked to buy and sell them a lot. So no, I didn't keep track of every plane he bought and sold.
Your father also did not properly register all of his planes, correct?
That's correct.
And at the time that he disappeared, his pilot's license was suspended, wasn't it?
It was.
Your father had flown before without logging a flight plan with a local airstrip, right?
Yes, he had.
Your father had flown before without logging a flight plan with a local airport, correct?
He did, but he always told me about it.
I didn't ask you what he told you. I asked you, he did not he did not log a flight plan every single time with a local airport, correct?
That's correct.
Your father had flown multiple times without logging a flight plan with any authority at all, correct?
He had, but each time he did, he told me about it.
Again, Ms. Donaldson, I didn't ask you whether or not he told you. I asked you, your father had flown multiple times without logging a flight plan with any authority at all, correct?
Yes, he did.
You last saw your father around 6 p.m. Friday, August 17th, correct?
Yes, exactly that time. I'll never forget it.
You didn't speak with your father at all the following day, right?
No, he said if I wanted to stop by on Sunday, I could. If not, he would see me on Monday, but we didn't talk on Saturday.
You didn't go to his house that Saturday?
I didn't.
You didn't live with him at the time, right?
No, he and Karen lived together.
You didn't interact with your father at all that day, correct?
No, he said he would see me on Sunday. If not, he would see me on Monday.
You don't know what your father did on August 18th, 2012, right?
I know he said he was going to spend the weekend at home.
But to be clear, and to go back to my question, you don't know what he did that day, correct?
No, I don't know exactly what he did that day.
You didn't drive him anywhere that day, right?
No, we didn't see each other at all on August 18th.
You didn't speak with him, correct?
No, I didn't.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Ayers, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Ms. Donaldson, opposing counsel asked you a lot of questions about what you did and didn't do on August 19th. When you arrived at the office that day and you saw the defendant with that lockbox, did you know your father was dead?
No, I and no one else was even alleging that he was missing at that time.
Thank you. No further questions at this time. May this witness be excused.
Yes, Ms. Donaldson, you're excused with thanks to the court. Plaintiff, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Taylor Pride to the stand.
All right, Ms. Pride, you've been sworn to tell the truth. Counsel, you may proceed when you're ready.
Good evening, Ms. Pride. Can you see and hear me okay on your screen?
I can.
Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Hi, my name is Taylor Pride, and that's spelled Pride.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a private investigator.
How are you involved in today's case?
Well, I was hired by Miss Cam Donaldson to investigate the disappearance of Lou Donaldson.
Before we talk about the evidence, I want the members of the jury to get a better sense of your credentials. How long have you been working as an investigator?
I have been an investigator for 20 years now.
Where have you worked as an investigator?
Well, I spent the first 16 years of that as a detective with the Pioneer Police Department, and then the last 4, I've been a private investigator.
Did you receive formal training?
I did. I went to the police academy prior to becoming a police officer.
Did you have any experience examining financial documents?
Yes, I've investigated a lot of economic crimes, so that necessarily involves reviewing financial documents.
Do you have experience investigating disappearances?
Yes, I do.
Do you have experience investigating homicides?
Yes, I do.
So let's talk about your work in today's case. What evidence did you have access to for that work?
Well, I looked at witness accounts and financial documents and also some photographs.
You mentioned financial documents. Which documents did you examine?
I looked at Lou Donaldson's bank records and also the report from the life insurance company and the will that was produced by the defendant shortly after Mr. Donaldson's disappearance.
You also mentioned witness statements. Did you have access to a statement from the defendant herself?
I did. I reviewed the statement from her deposition.
Okay. I want to talk about what you found. So when you read the defendant's deposition, according to the defendant, when did her husband go missing?
According to her, he went missing on August 17th of 2012.
In her sworn statement, does the defendant offer an explanation of her husband's disappearance?
She says that he may have moved down to Costa Rica.
Did you investigate that, the idea that Lou moved to Costa Rica?
I did.
How did you do that?
Well, I reviewed Mr. Donaldson's bank records, and I also sent an investigator to Costa Rica.
What evidence did you find that Lou Donaldson had in fact moved to Costa
None.
So you mentioned financial documents. I believe you mentioned a bank record. What bank record was that?
This was Lou Donaldson's bank statement for the 5 years after he went missing.
Your Honor, may we display Exhibit 2? It's already in evidence.
You may.
Ms. Pride, when you were investigating the possibility that Lou Donaldson moved to Costa Rica, why did you look at this bank statement?
Well, I wanted to see if he'd made any big withdrawals or if he transferred his assets or if he even started spending any money in Costa Rica.
After Lou Donaldson went missing on August 17th of 2012, how much money did he spend in Costa Rica?
Not a single dollar.
After Lou Donaldson went missing, how many deposits did he make?
None.
How many withdrawals?
Also none.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ayers. Okay, so putting that to the side for a moment, did you investigate any other possibilities aside from the idea that Lou moved to Costa Rica to explain his disappearance?
I did. I also looked at the possibility that the defendant killed her husband.
So let's start then with motive. According to the defendant, what was the status of her relationship at the time her husband went missing?
Well, she admits that her husband had asked her for a divorce.
Did you try to determine what would happen, how much money the defendant would receive if instead of getting that divorce, her husband was to die?
Yes, I did.
How did you determine that?
I looked at the will and also the life insurance policy and the defendant's own statement.
So if instead of that divorce, Lou was to die, how much money would the defendant receive?
Well, between the property and the cash, she would receive approximately $10 million.
So let's talk about what the defendant was doing the night her husband disappeared. Does the defendant say where she was that night?
Yes, she does.
Where was that?
Well, she claims she left her house in the middle of the night.
Did she say where she went?
She said she went out to try and get some milk.
Who, if anyone, does the defendant say she saw when she went out to get milk in the middle of the night?
Only her brother.
Ma'am, do you know where the defendant's brother, do you know what he does for a living?
I do. He is a deputy for the sheriff's department.
Do you know which law enforcement agency investigated this case, ma'am?
The sheriff's department, the same one where the defendant's brother works.
Based on your investigation, I want to talk about what the defendant did after her husband disappeared. Based on your investigation, after the defendant met up with her husband, or met up with her brother, at 3 a.m. in the middle of the night, how many people said that they saw Lou Donaldson alive?
None.
After Lou Donaldson disappeared, did the defendant say that she called her husband?
No, she didn't.
After Lou Donaldson disappeared, did the defendant say that she called the police?
No, she didn't.
According to the defendant, what was the first thing she did after her husband went missing?
She went to his office where he kept his will.
Thank you, Ms. Pride. Your Honor, we have no further questions at this time.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yeah, I just asked Mr. Travisani if I can have you put a camera back up just so we can have all counsel for this handling this witness. You don't have to stand up. If you've got a different camera you want to use, that's fine. Thank you. All right, Ms. Barron, you may proceed.
Ms. Pride, Cam Donaldson hired you in July 2017, right?
Yes, that's right.
She hired you specifically to investigate where her father was and to examine his will, right?
She did.
She didn't hire you to investigate Lou's disappearance right after he disappeared, did she?
No, it was just recently.
Cam hired you when Lou had been missing for 4 years and 11 months, right?
Yes.
That was 1 month before Lou Donaldson could be declared legally dead, right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Ms. Pride, you believe Mr. Donaldson's will was fraudulent, don't you?
I do.
You are not certified by the Association of Certified Fraud Specialists, are you?
No, but I have extensive experience in handwriting analysis, and that's what led to my conclusion.
Ms. Pride, back to my question. You're not certified by the Association of Certified Fraud Specialists, are you?
No, I'm not.
You never found a different will, did you?
I didn't.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance and confusing the issues under 403.
Response.
Your Honor, it seems the opposing counsel is claiming here that Cam Donaldson should have gotten a different inheritance under a different will, and that this was Karen's motive for stealing a document and forging the separate will. I think it's relevant here that there is no alternative will. We have the one that's in front of us today.
May I respond?
Very briefly.
Yes, Your Honor. This witness concluded that the will in this case is a forgery, but we didn't offer that conclusion on direct because this is a wrongful death case. This isn't a probate case. So for defense to undermine that conclusion that isn't being presented, it's irrelevant under Rule 401, and it has the potential to confuse the issues for the members of the jury under Rule 403.
I understand your record, counsel. I think at this point, I don't see that this question goes to that specific issue. If anything, to me, it seems to relate collaterally to Cam Donaldson's testimony about the existence of another will and whether or not this person that the plaintiff has indicated did extensive investigation ever found such a document. So the objection's overruled.
Ms. Pride, just to clarify, you never found a different will, did you?
No, I didn't.
You believe Ms. Baja cut into a lockbox to get a will after Mr. Donaldson disappeared, right?
Yes, I do.
You never saw this lockbox, did you?
No, I didn't.
You never saw a picture of the lockbox that had been broken into, did you?
Not the specific lockbox, no.
You never talked to the police to see what they knew about a stolen lockbox?
I didn't.
During your investigation, you didn't talk to any other employees of Wild Wildlife other than Cam, is that right?
Yeah, that's true.
Let's talk about signatures. It's hard for someone to write their signature the same way every single time, right?
Yes, it is.
This means that how somebody writes their signature today and how they write it tomorrow will be different.
Yeah.
So if two signatures are 100% identical, they're almost guaranteed to be forged, right?
Right, that's something I would look at that would suggest to me a signature was forged.
Ms. Pride, for your analysis and your report, you collected Mr. Donaldson's signatures from a legal document, a state-issued driver's license, and a note he wrote Cam in 2012, right?
Yes, I did.
You collected 3 signatures, but your report only analyzes 2, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
You failed to provide any analysis of Lou's signature on the note he wrote his daughter, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I felt like the 2 were enough for me to come to my conclusion.
So, Ms. Pride, you failed to say if that signature was similar or different to Lou's signature on the will, right?
Right.
You didn't bring that note today so that we could look at it ourselves, did you?
No, I didn't.
Ms. Pride, you determined that the driver's license and the legal document were signed by the same person, right?
Yes, I did.
We'd like to combine the signatures you looked at into one document while we speak. Can you turn to page 40, showing Mr. Renard's signature comparison?
Yes.
Bates number ending. Do you have it? Great.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you give me just 1 second?
Of course, it's Bates number ending 007.
Okay, I've got it.
You reviewed Chris Renard's report and coming to your opinion, right?
I did.
One of the signatures you analyzed in reaching your opinion was Lou's state-issued driver's license signature, as shown here in the report, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you now turn to the legal document on page 55 with Bates number ending 0016?
Yes. Okay, I've got it.
Is this signature on this document a signature you analyzed in coming to your opinion?
No, I don't believe so.
Ms. Pride, you collected 3 signatures as we discussed, including one from a legal document. Are you saying that that's not the legal document you see in front of yourself today?
Oh no, I'm sorry. This is the one. This is one I looked at.
Finally, can you please turn to page 53 to the document titled Last Will and Testament with number ending 0014?
Yep, I've got it.
Is Lou's signature on this last will and testament the one that you analyzed?
Yes, it is.
Ms. Pride, my co-counsel, Mr. New, has put these 3 signatures into one document. Your Honor, may we have permission to publish these as a demonstrative?
What's the position of the plaintiff?
No objection, Your Honor.
In light of that, you may proceed. This is obviously a demonstrative exhibit only at this point.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Pride, let's talk about some of the similarities you noted in your report, finding that the top 2 signatures here were written by the same person.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
in both, the L in Lou has a top loop that is smaller than the bottom loop, right?
Right.
Mr. Donaldson's signature on the will has that feature, right?
Yes, it looks like it.
In both these top 2, the O in Lou has an extra loop, correct?
Yes, it appears so.
Mr. Donaldson's signature on the will has that feature, right?
Yeah, it almost looks like it has 2 extra loops there, but yes.
Now, in both of these top 2 signatures, the U in Lou has a small tail embellishment, right?
Yes.
Mr. Donaldson's signature on the will has that feature, right?
Yeah, not quite as pronounced as the other 2, but it's on there.
So, Ms. Pride, the U in Lou has a small tail embellishment in the signature on the will, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so.
In both these top 2, there's a tail embellishment as well on the second N in Donaldson, right?
There is.
The signature on the will also has a tail embellishment on that N, correct?
Yeah, it looks different than the other 2, but there's an embellishment.
In all 3, the D in Donaldson has 2 separate pen strokes, correct?
Yes, it appears so.
So, Ms. Pride, we just looked at the loops in the L, the O in Lou, the tail embellishments on the U and the second N, and the D in Donaldson. That's 5 features present on all of the signatures you reviewed, correct?
Yep, yeah, that math sounds right.
Thank you, Mr. New. Ms. Pride, let's switch gears. I'd like to talk to you about where Lou Donaldson is today. You investigated whether Lou went to Costa Rica, right?
I did.
You think it's unlikely he went to Costa Rica because his glasses and keys were left in his van, right?
Yes.
You don't know if Lou needed his car key in Costa Rica, do you?
No.
You don't know if Lou needed his Pioneer house keys in Costa Rica, do you?
No, I don't know.
You don't know if the glasses in his van were reading glasses or for seeing at a distance, right?
No, I don't know.
Ms. Pride, you don't know how many planes Lou owned, right?
No, I don't.
You don't know where he kept the planes he did own, correct?
That's correct.
You didn't go talk to anyone at the airstrip where Mr. Donaldson's van was left, did you?
No, I didn't.
The distance from Statesville to Costa Rica is 2,200 miles, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Mr. Donaldson would have had to stop 3 to 4 times during a flight of that distance, wouldn't he?
Probably, given that he was flying small planes.
So this means taking off and landing 4 to 5 times in one trip. Is that right?
Yes.
A plane could crash during a trip of that distance, right?
Sure, a plane could crash in a trip of any distance.
Ms. Pride, you didn't go yourself to look for Mr. Donaldson in Costa Rica, did you?
No, I didn't.
You sent an employee there to look for him, right?
Yes.
Your employee was looking for Lou at least 5 years after he disappeared, right?
Yeah.
And your employee found no trace that Lou had been there in August 2012 or any time after, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Let's talk about what your employee did. You don't know the name of anyone your employee talked to, do you?
No, I don't.
You don't know how many people your employee talked to in Costa Rica?
Nope.
You don't know if your employee went to certain cities or towns in Costa Rica, right?
No, I don't.
You don't know if your employee spoke with Lou's mistress, right?
I don't.
And Ms. Pride, you never found Mr. Donaldson, did you?
No, I didn't find him.
The Pioneer County Sheriff's Office still considers this case to be active, right?
Yeah, from my understanding, they do.
You think the Sheriff's Office hasn't done a thorough investigation, is that right?
Yes, that's definitely true.
You haven't looked at their files in this case, have you?
Not all of them, no.
You haven't read any of their witness statements, have you?
No.
You haven't examined a police report?
No, I haven't.
Ms. Pride, you don't have access to much information at all about what the Sheriff's Office has investigated, do you?
No, I haven't gotten access to that.
To your knowledge, the Sheriff's Office hasn't uncovered any physical evidence of foul play, have they?
Well, I haven't seen it, so I can't speculate to that.
Back to my question, to your knowledge, Sheriff's Office hasn't uncovered any evidence of foul play, right?
To my knowledge, no, because I haven't seen anything that they did.
You haven't learned of any signs of blood or a struggle in the van left behind, right?
Nope.
You don't know of any evidence of blood or a struggle at Mr. Donaldson's house, do you?
No, I don't.
You don't know of any evidence of blood or a struggle at Wild Wildlife either, right?
Nope, I don't.
Ms. Pride, since Lou disappeared, the Sheriff's Office has never charged Ms. Baja, have they?
They haven't.
They've never listed her as a suspect, have they?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Ms. Pride, in your investigation, you never talked to Karen Baja, did you?
Not personally, but I reviewed her statement.
So to go back to my question, Ms. Pride, you never talked to Karen Baja, did you?
No, not personally.
No further questions.
Redirect, Mr. Travisani.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Pride, opposing counsel asked you quite a few questions about handwriting. What does handwriting have to do with the investigation of Lou Donaldson's disappearance that you told us about on direct examination?
Nothing.
Thank you, Ms. Pride. Your Honor, we have no further questions. May Ms. Pride be excused?
She may. Are there any further witnesses or evidence from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff rests our case in chief.
All right, thank you. At this point, we're at about 7:15, at least according to the court's clock. So we're going to take a 5-minute recess, give everybody a chance to stretch their legs, and we'll resume with any other issues or the defense case when we come back. Let's try to be back in the courtroom at 7:21, please. And we'll be in recess. All right, before we get started back up here, just ask our judges to please just confirm for me in the chat that you are back and ready to go, and then we'll recall the case. Everybody just hang tight one more minute. I just want to make sure we've got everybody here. All right, it looks like we have all of our jurors back and ready to go. So with that, are there any issues we need to address before we proceed to the defense case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, pursuant to Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 50, the defense moves for judgment as a matter of law.
All right, go ahead with your motion, counsel.
Your Honor, no reasonable juror after the plaintiff's case in chief could conclude that, one, Lou Donaldson is in fact dead, and two, even if he is, that Ms. Baja is the one responsible for his death. And because they fail on both of those elements of their claim, the judgment as a matter of law should be approved. They provided no direct or circumstantial evidence that suggests that Lou is dead. They provided no direct or circumstantial evidence that Ms. Baja killed him. The plaintiff herself admitted that her father regularly owns planes, that he does not register and takes off on a whim and disappears. Based on all the evidence that's been provided and the frankly less than thorough examination and investigation that their expert witness done, as exposed by my co-counsel, Ms. Barron, we believe that no reasonable juror could conclude that that Lou Donaldson is in fact dead, nor is Ms. Baja the one who killed him, even if he is, and therefore we ask for a judgment as a matter of law.
Response?
Your Honor, the motion should be denied because viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the plaintiff, a reasonable jury could find that we've met our burden. Our claim of proof requires three elements. First, a reasonable jury could conclude here that Lou Donaldson is dead. He hasn't been seen or heard from in 8 years, and his bank activities ceased the night that he went missing. Second, a reasonable jury could conclude that the defendant caused his death. She's the only person, as we've discussed, who benefited from his death, the only person with motive. The night that Mr. Donaldson disappeared, the defendant admits to leaving her home and meeting up with her brother under circumstances that could charitably be described as implausible. Perhaps most telling is her behavior after he went missing. When Mr. Donaldson had only been gone for 36 hours, the defendant declared that his property belonged to her. She knew he was dead, and a reasonable jury could conclude that she knew because she killed him. So our final element would be damages, and of course, a daughter experiences loss when her father is killed. So we believe we've met our burden for this case to go to the jury.
All right, thank you, counsel. At this point, I'm going to deny defense's motion. I believe while there are some evidentiary challenges and some of it is circumstantial, that the plaintiff has presented a case that at least the court at this point is not prepared to take away from the jury, so your motion is denied. Defense, you may call your first witness.
Your Honor, we call Karen Baja to the stand.
All right, Ms. Baja, you've been sworn to tell the truth. Counsel, you can begin your examination when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Good evening. My name is Karen Baja.
Ms. Baja, can you tell us about your relationship with Lou Donaldson?
Yes, Lou was my husband. He rescued me when I was hitchhiking one night. I loved him and I knew he was my soulmate the first night we met.
When did you get married, Ms. Baja?
We married in May of 2001.
Can you tell us about your marriage?
I loved Lou, and together we dedicated our lives to our cats and our big cat emporium, Wild Wildlife.
What did the two of you do at Wild Wildlife?
We did everything we could to preserve and protect our cats. It was my life's passion, and Lou knew how dedicated I was to our work.
Were there ever any issues between you and Lou?
I loved Lou, and no marriage is perfect. We had our problems, but we were working through it.
What do you mean when you say you had your problems?
Lou at one point did ask for a divorce, and he had a mistress in Costa Rica, but like I said, we were working through it.
During these problems that you were working through, or at any point in your marriage, did you ever harm or threaten Lou?
No, I never harmed or threatened him. I loved him.
Now, can you tell me about your relationship with Cam Donaldson, Lou's daughter?
Cam has never liked me, and it's clear she never will.
Ms. Baja, I'd like to talk about the night Lou disappeared, August 17th, 2012. What were you doing the evening of his disappearance?
I was taking care of some newborn cubs. They had been born a few days earlier, and their mother had rejected them.
So what were you doing to take care of these baby cubs?
I was exhausted, and I realized that we were out of supplies for the cubs, like food, like milk and formula. So I went to the store, and when I went to go home, my car broke down.
What time was this that your car broke down?
So it was around 3 a.m.
What did you do?
Well, I was so exhausted that I'd left my cell phone at home. So I flagged down a passing car, borrowed a cell phone, and I called my brother, Carl.
And why did you call your brother Carl?
Carl is a deputy sheriff, and I knew he was working that night. So I thought it'd be a good idea to call him so he could bring me home to my cubs.
Do you know where Lou was that night?
I had spent all my time with the cubs, and I was in the nursery. I didn't know if Lou was home.
Where did you think Lou was?
Lou was a pilot, and he had planes that he kept at different hangars. He would use them for business and other matters.
Objection, Your Honor. Witness is speculating as to where Lou was. She just said she had no idea where he was that evening.
Response.
Your Honor, opposing counsel has made it relevant that Ms. Baja was with her brother and has called some suspicion on that. We're simply trying to explain why it is that she called her brother and didn't call Lou. Her knowledge or her belief of where Lou was in that moment is important for that.
Well, counsel, I think that's a different, her knowledge or belief is different than at least the question or answer that I was hearing. So I'll ask you to just rephrase the question. Objection sustained.
Your Honor, move to strike the testimony.
It is stricken.
Ms. Baja, where did you think Lou was that night?
Objection, Your Honor. Question calls for the witness to speculate. She already answered that she didn't know where he was.
Overruled.
Well, Lou was a pilot. He had planes. He used them for business and other matters.
So what did you know about Lou's travel when he was gone?
Well, Lou often flew without recording a flight path to fly off the radar, and his license was suspended. He would fly back and forth to Costa Rica, where his mistress was.
What happened after Lou's disappearance?
I went to the office the night Lou went missing.
Why did you go to the office that night?
I didn't trust Cam, and I own Wild Wildlife. I had every right to be there.
What happened after this weekend when Lou had disappeared?
About a week later, Carla and I went to the airstrip for Lou's van. His glasses and keys were on the seat. I hoped and prayed Lou would come home for weeks. And after a few years, it seemed more likely that he wasn't coming home.
Do you know where Lou is right now?
I don't. His body was never found, and it's been a struggle dealing with the uncertainty of it all.
So what did you do when you realized that Lou wasn't coming home?
I thought the best way to get closure was to have him declared legally dead.
What did this mean? So what happened after he was declared legally dead?
According to the will, I inherited his estate, which was $5 million, and there was an insurance payout I received of $5 million.
Now, to your knowledge, who wrote that will?
Lou chose the words in his will. He did.
And what are you going to do with that $10 million?
All of it is going to Wild Wildlife and the tigers.
Karen, I want to make sure we're clear. Did you kill your husband?
No, I didn't.
No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Can you see and hear me okay, Ms. Barger?
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Now, back in 2012, your husband wanted a divorce, right?
He did, but we were working through that.
I'm not asking if you were working through it. I'm asking what your husband wanted. He wanted a divorce.
He said that. That's correct.
You didn't want a divorce.
Correct.
Now, back in 2012, your husband was a rich man, right?
You could say that.
Well, his estate was worth $5 million, right?
Correct.
Your husband, he never got that divorce, did he?
No, we were working through it.
I'm not asking whether you were working through it. I'm just asking whether your husband got that divorce. And he
No.
didn't.
Correct.
Now, on August 17th, 2012, he disappeared.
Correct.
And as a result of his disappearance, you inherited the entirety of that $5 million estate, right?
I did.
You also got an insurance payout.
I did.
That was worth an additional $5 million, right?
Correct.
I want to talk about what you say you were doing the night that Lou Donaldson disappeared. Now, you said on direct examination that late at night on the 17th, early morning on the 18th, you left the house, right?
Correct.
That was at 3 a.m.
Around then, yes.
You left, you say, to go buy milk, right?
Milk and formula for the cubs.
Milk and formula, right? You don't have receipts from the purchases of that milk and formula, do you?
It was 8 years ago. I don't.
So that's a no, you don't have receipts.
No,
You forgot your phone at home, you said, right?
I was exhausted. Yes.
Well, that means you don't have any GPS data showing you actually went to the shop.
No,
Well, then your car broke down, didn't it?
it did.
But you don't have any documentation to show us of a repair?
No,
You had to borrow someone else's phone, didn't you?
correct.
But the person whose phone you borrowed, they're not on your witness list today, are they?
They are not.
But you did manage to call someone, didn't you?
Yes, my brother.
Right, you didn't call your husband, did you?
No, I didn't know if he was home.
Right, you said that on direct examination. You said you didn't know your husband was at home. But Miss Barger, you just come from your home.
Correct. I was in the nursery all night with the cubs.
So that's a yes. You just come from your home, but you didn't know if your husband was there.
Correct.
So instead, you called your brother.
Correct.
Your brother, who is a deputy sheriff.
Yes.
And after you met up with your brother at 3 a.m., you never saw or heard from your husband again.
That's correct.
After you met up with your brother at 3 a.m., as far as you know, no one ever saw or heard from your husband again.
That's correct.
So let's explore this idea that your husband just decided to leave. Now, when you got back to your home at just after 3 a.m., his suitcases weren't missing, were they?
Not that I'm aware of.
His clothes weren't missing?
I don't recall. Not that I'm aware of.
You don't recall whether his clothes were missing when your husband disappeared?
Not that they weren't. Not that I'm aware of.
You don't remember his toothbrush being missing?
No, it wasn't.
Now, you said on direct examination that your husband often flew planes, right?
Correct.
In fact, his van was found at an airstrip.
It was.
But in the front seat of that van were his glasses, right, Miss Baja?
Yes.
Your husband, he'd sometimes fly without telling you, right?
Correct.
But he'd always come back.
Until this time.
So up until August 17th, 2012, whenever your husband flew, he'd come back.
Correct.
Just to be clear, before your husband disappeared on August 17th, 2012, he never told you, I'm thinking I'm going to move to Costa Rica.
No.
After August 17th, 2012, he never called you and said, I've moved out of the country.
No, I didn't hear from him.
After August 17th, 2012, he never called you and said, you know what? Forget about that divorce. Why don't you just have me declared dead and take all my money?
No.
I want to talk about how you acted after your husband disappeared. When you came back that night, early morning on the 18th, you discovered your husband was missing?
Yes.
You didn't call him?
I did not.
Didn't text him?
I did not.
Didn't email him?
I did not.
In the last 8 years, you never hired a private investigator to try and find your husband?
I did not.
In the last 8 years, you've never tried to contact your husband?
No, I did not.
No further questions.
Ms. Barron, any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Baja, you are excused with thanks of the court. Does the defense have any further evidence or witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, we would call Chris Renard at this time.
All right, Ms. Renard, you've been sworn to tell the truth. And I see Mr. Trevisani is handling the cross-examination. So, Mr. New, you can proceed when you're ready.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is Chris Bernard.
What do you do for a living, Ms. Renard?
I am a forensic document examiner and insurance claim investigator for Summit Life Insurance Company.
How did you come to be involved in this case?
Well, Summit assigned me to investigate Lou Donaldson's life insurance claim and determine whether Summit Insurance Company would pay out to his widow, Karen Baja.
Now, before we get into the specifics of the investigation, I want to take a step back. Can you please tell the jury a little bit about your educational background?
Yes, I got my bachelor's degree from Summit College, and then I also attended the Statesville Police Academy.
And could you also please tell the jury a little bit about your work experience?
Yes, after attending the Statesville Police Academy, I worked for the Statesville Bureau of Investigation Crime Lab as a forensic document examiner for about 3 years. And then I moved on to working for Summit Life Insurance as a forensic document examiner and a claims investigator. And I've been there for the past 20 years.
Ms. Renard, do you have any specialties?
Yes, I in particular specialize in handwriting and signature identification, and as well as fabricated documents, altered records.
Are you board certified?
Yes, I have two certifications that are relevant to what I do. I'm certified with the Board of Forensic Document Examiners and with the Association of Certified Fraud Specialists.
You mentioned earlier that you were asked to investigate whether Lou Donaldson's life insurance claim needed to be paid out or not, and whether it was required to be paid out to his widow, Ms. Karen Baja. Is that part of your regular practice?
Yes, that's what I do on a daily basis.
Could you please tell the jury a little bit about what you do in your role as an insurance claim investigator?
Yes, I mean, I can do a lot of different things. So I investigate from start to finish. I conduct risk surveys to assess losses. I collect and preserve critical evidence and documentation. I conduct investigative interviews. I review insurance claims and incident reports and police reports, and ultimately I verify claims.
What work did you do in this case?
Well, in this case, my main goal was to determine whether Summit needed to pay out on this claim. So I began by collecting signatures, known signatures from Mr. Donaldson. So I collected specifically his policy from our company's standpoint and the signature portion of that. I collected his driver's license. I looked at the will that is at issue in this case. I also interviewed his friends, his family. I interviewed the individuals that had been listed as witnesses to the will. And then I also ended up examining a bank statement of Mr. Donaldson's and a contact that I had at the sheriff's office. I spoke with him as well.
That's a lot of work to do in this case. Was all that work the product of reliable principles and methods?
Yes.
And are all the sources of materials that you collected the sorts of materials that are reasonably relied upon by experts in your field?
Yes.
Did you in fact rely upon all these sources of materials in coming to your opinions in this case?
Yes, I did.
And do you believe that your investigation produced sufficient facts and data to come to your conclusions?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Renard. I want to start now by talking a little bit about the insurance claim. Now, who filed the insurance claim after Lou Donaldson was declared legally dead?
Karen Baja did.
When did she file that claim?
She filed the claim on August 18th, 2017. It was the same day that she had Mr. Donaldson legally declared dead.
In your experience investigating insurance claims, how common is it for a beneficiary to file for an insurance claim on the same day that the deceased is declared legally dead?
I mean, some claimants certainly do file the same day, particularly if it has been 5 years since a disappearance. But it can be a cause for concern, but it does happen.
Let's talk now a little bit about the will. What exactly did Summit Life Insurance ask you to look into with regard to the will?
Specifically, Summit Life Insurance wanted to know one of two questions. So whether the will had been forged or whether, specifically with the will, it was whether it had been forged.
And what were your initial impressions when you first looked at the will?
I mean, one odd thing did stand out to me. It had the word disappear in it, so that was a little strange.
Why is that strange?
Well, in my past 20 years at Summit Life Insurance, I have never seen that language before, so it was a bit odd.
You also mentioned before that you reviewed Lou Donaldson's bank statement during your investigation. What did you notice when you reviewed that?
Well, there were no payments made after the date of Lou Donaldson's disappearance, so August of 2017, or 2012, excuse me.
And how did the lack of any payments or deposits into that account affect your opinions in this case?
I mean, it's just common sense that if somebody had $100,000 sitting in a bank account, they wouldn't just leave it there and then go live a life of luxury on another island. So it definitely seemed odd to me.
You said you also spoke with someone at the sheriff's office during your investigation. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And without getting into the details at all of what they told you, how did what the sheriff's office told you affect your opinions in this case?
Basically, it made me confident that we should pay out on the claim in this case.
Now, let's talk a little bit about your process for comparing signatures. Could you tell the jury a little bit about what that process is exactly?
Yes. So generally speaking, when you're comparing signatures, you collect known signatures. So as I mentioned earlier, I collected 2 known signatures from Lou Donaldson in this case. And then you compare those, ensure that those are both coherent and that they match. And then you look at the third signature or whatever your sample signature is. So in this case, the will, and you then compare the characteristics of the 2 known signatures to the signature at issue in the case.
I'd like to direct the witnesses opposing counsel and the court's attention to the case file page 40 and the exhibit that's listed there ending in Bates number 007. We'll constructively mark that as Defense Exhibit A for identification. Ms. Renard, could you let me know when you see that document?
I have it pulled up here.
Do you recognize Defense Exhibit A?
Yes.
What is it?
It is the signature comparison that I used for my analysis in this case.
Your Honor, at this time, we would enter Defense Exhibit A into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit A is admitted.
Permission to publish to the jury via screen share, Your Honor.
You may.
All right, Ms. Renard, can you see that all right?
Yes, I can.
Great. So now, could you please tell the jury where each of these 3 signatures came from and where you got them?
Yes. So the top signature up there, I got from the actual life insurance company paperwork that we had on file from his policy with us. The second, the middle signature, we got from his driver's license. And then the final signature at the bottom is the one that was at issue, the one from the last will and testament.
After you collected all 3 of these signatures, what did you do first?
So first I compared the 2 known signatures to see if they matched.
And could you just remind the jury on which of those signatures are?
Yes, the known signature 1, that top one, and the known signature 2, that middle one.
Now, Ms. Renard, have you reached an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty based on your education, training, and experience as to whether those 2 signatures matched?
Yes, I have.
What is that opinion?
The signatures share a lot of similarities: loops, strokes, direction of the strokes, embellishment, capitalization, and all of those similarities have led to my conclusion that the 2 match.
After you came to that conclusion and compared those 2 signatures, what did you do next?
So next, I compared the 2 known signatures to the one on the last will and testament.
Ms. Renard, have you reached an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty based on your education, training, and experience as to how all of those 3 signatures compare?
Yes, I have.
What is that opinion?
They match.
What is the basis for that opinion?
So again, all 3 of them share these striking similarities: the looping of the L and the D, the S and the O, etc., the stroke direction of all of the signatures, the curves and the angles of the letter, the matching embellishments on all 3 signatures, as well as the capitalization.
And do you have any reservations that come with that opinion?
I mean, obviously, it could possibly have been copied, but it's unlikely.
Thank you, Ms. Renard. Now, Ms. Renard, have you reached an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty and ultimate conclusion in this case as to whether the last will and testament of Lou Donaldson is genuine?
Yes, I have.
What is that opinion?
It is genuine.
And what is the basis for that opinion?
The matching signatures, as well as the other indications, the interviews I did, et cetera, all indicated to me that while it was possible that the signature could have been copied, it was unlikely, and the signatures at best would have been inconclusive.
Thank you, Mr. Renard. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Trevisani.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Renard. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
I want to talk about the police investigation in this case. Now, you're aware that the defendant's husband disappeared on August 17th of 2012.
Yes, I'm aware.
5 years after Lou Donaldson disappeared, you were hired to look into whether the defendant killed her husband. True?
I mean, I wasn't hired. I was just assigned it. It was just part of my job at Summit Life Insurance.
Part of your job at Summit Life Insurance was to investigate whether or not the defendant killed her husband, right?
I mean, it was to determine whether we were going to pay out. So I guess in this case, that was part of the investigation. But
To be clear, ma'am, if you found evidence that the defendant killed her husband, would you have recommended that the insurance company pay out?
no, I wouldn't have. That would have been a good day for Summit Life Insurance policy. Unfortunately, That's not what I found.
All right, so as part of that investigation into whether the defendant killed her husband, well, you contacted the sheriff's department in this case, right?
Yes, I had a contact there.
Well, aside from that anonymous contact, ma'am, you actually formally requested documents from the sheriff's department, right?
That's correct.
But the defendant's brother, well, you're aware that he works for that same sheriff's department.
I am aware of that. Yes.
The sheriff's department refused to give you any of the documents that you requested.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. It's an ongoing investigation.
Ma'am, I didn't ask whether you believed this was common. I'm just asking what the police did. And they didn't give you any documents in this case, right?
You're correct. I can't tell you what else the police did if that's your question.
Ma'am, you never looked at a single police report in this case, right?
No, that wasn't my job.
So then let's talk about what happened on August 17th of 2012. Now, you read the defendant's deposition as part of your work in today's case, right?
Yes, I did.
The defendant admits that she was home that night, right?
That's correct.
Same home she shared with her husband, right?
Correct.
The defendant, she says she left her home in the middle of the night, right?
That is what she said.
The defendant said that she met up with her brother at 3 a.m., right?
That's what she said.
Ma'am, you understand that to be the same brother that works for the sheriff's department, right?
Based on my understanding, yes.
After the defendant met up with her brother at 3 a.m., well, Lou Donaldson was never seen again based on all the evidence that you reviewed in this case, right?
Are you asking whether he disappeared on that day?
Ma'am, after the defendant met up with her brother, well, you didn't review any evidence that Lou Donaldson was seen alive after that point, right?
That's correct. I did not review any evidence that he was seen alive after that point.
Now, you are an investigator, right, ma'am?
I am a claims investigator, yes.
So naturally, you spoke to Lou Donaldson's family, right?
I did.
You spoke to his friends.
I did.
You spoke to his business associates, right, ma'am?
I did.
You haven't spoken to a single person who saw Lou Donaldson since the defendant met up with her brother at 3 a.m.
That's correct. Well, I mean, if that's what she claims. I haven't spoken to anybody that has seen him since August of 2012.
All right, ma'am. Now, you reviewed Mr. Donaldson's bank statement in today's case, right?
I did.
Before August 17th of 2012, you'd agree with me that there were frequent deposits.
Yes.
There were frequent withdrawals.
Yes.
After August 17th of 2012, the deposits stopped.
That's correct.
The withdrawals stopped.
Yep.
After Lou Donaldson disappeared, there weren't any transactions listed in that account, right, ma'am?
That's correct.
After the defendant met up with her brother at 3 a.m., there wasn't a single transaction on that bank statement.
And counsel, after August of 2017, there wasn't a single transaction in that bank statement after the day he disappeared. That's correct.
So that's a yes to my question. After that time, when the defendant met up with her brother, after that date, there are no transaction on that account.
Counsel, I just don't have personal knowledge. I wasn't there with the defendant that morning. So I'm simply saying that what I know as an expert in my field is that after that date, there were no further payments in that account.
Yes, ma'am. And you read that deposition, right?
I did. I read what she claimed. You are correct.
So you know that after that date, she claims she met up with her brother in the middle of the night, right?
Counsel, that is what she claimed. I'm disagreeing with the way you're phrasing the question because that's not what I've previously stated in this case.
Ma'am, I just need a yes or a no to my questions. You read the defendant's deposition, right?
That's correct, as I said.
You know that it was 3 a.m. the day after Lou went missing, that she met up with her brother, right?
I know that that is what she claims, counsel.
Now, looking at this document, ma'am, there are no transactions after that point in time, right?
There are no transactions after that date. That is correct.
Thank you, Ms. Renard. Your Honor, we have no further questions at this time.
Mr. New, any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. We ask that the witness be excused.
All right, Ms. Renard, you are excused with thanks to the court. Is there any further evidence from the defense?
No, Your Honor. The defense rests its case in chief at this point and would, pursuant to Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 50, ask to renew its judgment as a matter of law.
I will note your request to renew that motion for the record, but I'm going to hold to the same ruling. So at this point, are both parties ready to proceed to closing?
Your Honor, could we please just have a time check and then also a brief 5-minute recess to prepare closings?
I think I can do a 3-minute recess to prepare.
That's perfect, Your Honor. Thank you.
How about this? We'll just make sure we're back here at 8:01 on the court's clock, and I'll ask, I think Ms. Pride had done the time check the last time. If you could just update everyone on the time, that'd be great. And we'll just stand in recess here for a couple minutes. For our jurors, if any of you are going to leave or need to step away, please just let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to assume nobody's actually leaving their station, even if your camera's off. All right, we'll go ahead and call the court back to order. And it looks like I need to confirm with my notes, but I think both of the attorneys that will be presenting closing arguments are here at least, so I'm going to presume everyone else is ready to go. All our scoring jurors are present, and so it looks like we have updated times in the chat. Are there any issues we need to address prior to closing argument?
Not from the plaintiff, Your Honor.
Nor from the defense.
All right. We're going to follow the same procedure in terms of the cameras that we did during the opening statements. So encourage everybody to make sure you're muted and turn off your camera unless you need to unmute and put it on to object or something like that. I will do the same. Mr. Ayers, we'll turn it over to you to begin your closing argument when you're ready.
May I proceed?
You may.
May it please the court. It's a quiet Sunday morning until an alarm goes off. The defendant has just broken into her husband's office and stolen the lockbox containing his most important financial documents. It's only been 36 hours since her husband disappeared. The police don't know he's missing. His daughter doesn't know he's missing. But not only does the defendant know that he's missing, she knows he's never coming back. When Lou Donaldson threatened divorce, the defendant made him disappear. Now today, we had the burden of proof. But we didn't have the burden that you usually think about when one person is accused of killing another. We didn't have to prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt. Our burden was a preponderance of the evidence. We had to show that more likely than not, the actions of the defendant led to Lou Donaldson's death. And we met that burden today with 3 simple facts. Lou Donaldson told the defendant he was going to divorce her. 2 weeks later, he was dead. And the defendant was the one who killed him. So let's take those one at a time. First, Lou Donaldson told the defendant he was going to divorce her. Not maybe, not possibly. He said, I am going to file for divorce. Now that put the defendant's life of luxury in jeopardy. You see, Lou Donaldson was a rich man. He had a successful car dealership, private planes, exotic animals. The defendant, she told you today that she loved those animals. They were a passion. She told you today she didn't want a divorce. So when Lou Donaldson told her that he'd made the decision, that he was going to file, she threatened to kill him. Brings us to fact number 2. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Now, I want you to remember the testimony of private investigator Taylor Pride. She told you that when the defendant was first questioned about her husband's disappearance, well, she came up with a spectacular theory. A theory so spectacular, even their own expert witness didn't want to agree with it today. You heard her. She said, well, that's what Miss Barger claimed. She told you that her husband, well, he'd flown to Costa Rica and decided to live the rest of his days out there with his mistress. Members of the jury, that theory is nonsense. If Lou Donaldson had moved to Costa Rica, why isn't there a single penny that he spent there? Why isn't there evidence of a single penny that he spent anywhere? Why isn't there a single transaction showing Lou Donaldson alive after August 17th, 2012? If Lou Donaldson had moved to Costa Rica, why wasn't his toothbrush missing? Why weren't his clothes missing? Why weren't his suitcases missing? Why wasn't anything missing except the man himself? If Lou Donaldson were moving to Costa Rica, why would he leave everything to the defendant? Let's get this straight. Lou Donaldson spent a lifetime amassing a fortune. On August 3rd, he tells the defendant, "I'm going to divorce you." And just 2 weeks later, he decides to disappear and leave her everything? It doesn't make sense. Most importantly, members of the jury, if Lou Donaldson were moving to Costa Rica, why wouldn't he tell his daughter? By all accounts, they had a close relationship, a loving relationship. They'd worked together for decades. Why would he let his last words to his daughter be, "I'll see you on Monday"? Lou Donaldson isn't in Costa Rica. He's dead. That brings us to fact number 3. The defendant is the one who killed him. Now, here is where it's so important that you understand our burden. Because we don't have to prove how the defendant killed Lou Donaldson, what weapons she used, what she did with the body. We just have to prove that she killed him. And we've proven today that more likely than not, she did. On August 17th, 2012, the defendant left the office, told his daughter he was headed home. Lou Donaldson isn't here to tell us what happened that evening. The defendant's account is just impossible to believe. She says that she left the house at 3 a.m. to buy milk. But of course, she couldn't show us the receipts from that milk. She left her phone at home, so she couldn't show us any GPS data showing that she went anywhere. Her car broke down, but you didn't see the receipts from a towing company or a repair shop. And then she made a call. Not to her husband, who she didn't know whether he was at home or not, despite the fact she'd just come from the home. No. Instead, she called her brother. Her brother, the sheriff's deputy. Her brother, who worked at the same sheriff's department that investigated this case. And after the defendant met up with her brother at 3 a.m., no one ever saw or heard from her husband ever again. It gets worse. Members of the jury, I want you to think about how an innocent person would react if their spouse suddenly disappeared. They'd call. They'd text, "Where are you? When are you coming home? Please tell me you're okay." They'd reach out to friends, family, anyone they could think of. "Have you seen Lou? I don't know where he's gone. I'm worried." The defendant? She did none of that. Not the night her husband disappeared, not the next day, not for the next 8 years. You heard her today on the stand say how much she loved her husband, how much she prayed for his return, but her actions speak louder than her words. She never tried to contact her husband because she knew he wouldn't reply. She knew he couldn't reply. And then there's the lockbox. Just 36 hours after her husband's disappearance, she breaks into her husband's office and steals the lockbox containing his most important financial documents. And then she runs into Cam Donaldson. You heard Cam tell you today what the defendant said. I won. Your father is gone, and everything he owned is about to be mine. Members of the jury, how could she know that? I asked her today, your husband, sometimes he'd fly without telling you. She said, yes. I asked her, but he always came back, right? She said, yes. How could she know that this time? Well, this time was going to be different. This time, her husband wasn't coming back. Members of the jury, the only way she could know that is if she's the one who killed him. Now, it's true. We don't have blood or DNA to show you. As I said, the defendant's brother works in a sheriff's department. The same sheriff's department that investigated this case. The same sheriff's department that the defense's own expert witness told you today refused to release any of their evidence. But consider this. As far as we know, the defendant is the only person in the world with a reason to kill Lou Donaldson. Nobody else stood to inherit anything. The defendant stood to inherit everything. Now, it's important that you understand here what this case is about. The defense spent an awful lot of time together questioning witnesses about different wills, loops, handwriting analysis, signatures. Members of the jury, this isn't a probate case. This isn't a fraud case. We're not alleging that the will was false. All that evidence that the defense brought in about signature analysis, it's a distraction. What matters is that that will gave the defendant $10 million. Everything. And all the defendant had to do was not get a divorce. We have met our burden of proof. We have shown that it is more likely than not that the defendant killed Lou Donaldson. And what you've got on your screen is the jury verdict form. On behalf of Lou Donaldson's estate, we ask that you return the $10 million that the defendant gained as a result of killing her husband. And on the behalf of Cam Donaldson, we ask that you award whatever a loving father is worth to his loving daughter. On August 17th, 2012, Lou Donaldson said goodnight to his daughter. But he never got to say goodbye. Because he didn't know then what you know now, that waiting for him at home with a plan was the defendant. We ask that you find her liable for Lou Donaldson's wrongful death. Because when he threatened divorce, she made him disappear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. Mr. New, you may proceed with closing argument when you're ready.
What makes a good story? Is it a gripping plot with twists and turns and different events that you couldn't imagine in your wildest dreams? Is it a protagonist? Someone you can relate to and is a hero who's as strong as you could ever want to be? Or is it a villain? Someone so masterfully off-putting that you can't help but root against them. Personally, I think a great story has all those things, and the plaintiff's story has some of it. But what a truly great story does is when you look at it, when you examine it closely, when you look at the details of what the author is trying to tell you, it all makes sense. It adds up. It doesn't leave you with 1,000 plot holes and unanswered questions, and that's exactly where the plaintiff's story falters. Because when we take a look at the story that the plaintiff is actually trying to sell you, boy, are there a lot of plot holes and unanswered questions. And you know what? The plaintiff says that they don't have to prove to you a lot of different things like how Miss Baja killed him. But if they're going to try to prove to you how that Miss Baja killed her husband, that Karen would go and kill her loving husband, well, they do have to provide you with a story, and they have tried to indirectly. So let's walk through the story that the plaintiff is actually trying to get you to believe. In the early morning hours of Saturday, August 18th, 2012, Sheriff's Deputy Carl Bannister parked his squad car in a parking lot and waited for his sister to pick him up. Then Miss Baja and Deputy Bannister found Lou Donaldson, subdued him, incapacitated him, killed him, and then took his body over to the Wild Wildlife Sanctuary. Then they took his body and they put it inside of a meat grinder and ground up his remains, disposed of the bones, and then fed his remains to tigers. Then Ms. Baja and Deputy Bannister, well, they cleaned everything up. They made sure that there was no trace of any evidence whatsoever anywhere, not on the meat grinder, not on any utensils they might have used, nowhere. Then they stole Lou's van, drove it 40 miles out of town, planted his glasses and his keys there, and then made sure that they also didn't leave any physical evidence behind there, no blood, no fingerprints, nothing that they presented anyway. And then they drove the 40 miles back to town, dropped Deputy Bannister back off at his squad car, and then Deputy Bannister went back to his sheriff's office and convinced the police department to help cover up the murder. And then the police department said, "Sure, you got it, Carl. We will absolutely help you cover up this murder for this woman we do not know or care about." What? Why in the world would the police department somehow agree to cover up a murder just because someone in their office was involved in it? Make no mistake, that's the story that the plaintiff is trying to get you to believe, that entire story, but it's clear when we really look at it that there's a lot of information that they could not provide you and that they pretend they don't have to because it's easier for them that way. Where was Lou when Karen and Deputy Bannister found him? How did they subdue him? How did they kill him? What weapon did they use? How did they transport him to Wild Wildlife? Was he already at Wild Wildlife and therefore they did not have to transport him at all? What did they do with the bones? You don't throw bones in a meat grinder, and animals certainly don't swallow bones whole. So what did they do with the bones so no one would ever find them? How did they clean everything up so that there would be no trace of physical evidence anywhere that anyone has ever found? Did they use towels? Well, then what did they do with those towels? It doesn't add up. As the judge will tell you, and as the plaintiff alluded to, they had two essential elements that they needed to prove to you. They needed to prove to you that Lou Donaldson is in fact dead. And they needed to prove to you that if he is dead, that Miss Baja was the one who killed him. But the story that they've provided you to try to prove that, it doesn't add up at the slightest bit of scrutiny. They're not presenting you with circumstantial evidence. What they're doing is they're begging you, pleading with you to please speculate wildly to fill in all of these countless gaps and evidentiary holes that they could not provide for you with actual proof. In the early morning hours of August 18th, 2012, Ms. Baja was at her home caring for some cubs, completely wrapped in putting her attention toward them because they'd been rejected by their mother. But then she realized that she needed formula and milk to feed them, otherwise they might die. So she rushed out the door because she loves these cats. She treats these cats like they're her own children. So she ran out the door and she forgot her phone. Then, to compound her bad luck, when she actually got to the store, her car broke down. A good Samaritan was kind enough to lend her their phone. She called her brother, a sheriff's deputy, who was on patrol that night, who she knew was on patrol that night. She called him and he picked her up and took her home. The plaintiff tries to make it seem like this story is absolutely implausible. But when people's attention are wrapped up in things that they are passionate about, that they are obsessed with, they forget things. The plaintiff tries to prove that this alibi is nonsensical because she didn't keep receipts from buying milk 8 years ago when she didn't even know she would need to save them. I ask you, what's actually implausible? What's actually nonsensical? Not keeping those receipts or demanding that they do when you have no reason to? Let's talk for a second about Lou Donaldson, the pilot, because doing so is essential to understanding what might have happened to Lou. Lou owned a lot of planes. By the plaintiff's own admission, he owned so many planes that she didn't know how many. And not only that, but he had some very poor flying habits. Lou Donaldson did not register all of his planes properly. Many of his planes were unknown to local authorities, to Karen, his wife, even to the plaintiff. The plaintiff also admitted on the stand today that Mr. Donaldson flew multiple times without logging flight plans anywhere. Lou took it as his prerogative, in the plaintiff's own words, to on a wind, take to the wind. In other words, disappear. He took it as his own prerogative to drive to one of his planes without telling anyone, hop in and disappear so that he was unknown and untraceable to local authorities because he didn't log a flight plan. His license was suspended too, without telling Karen because he wanted privacy, I guess, and without telling the plaintiff because that's just what Lou Donaldson does, or what Lou Donaldson did. The plaintiff claims that he threatened divorce, so she made him disappear. That line, they used both in opening and closing to try to convince you that something happened here. Karen suffered the loss of Lou, just like the plaintiff. She didn't cause it. Karen didn't make Lou Donaldson disappear. That's just what Lou does. He disappears. And there's another important part of the story the plaintiff is trying to sell you that simply does not add up with the slightest scrutiny: the lockbox incident. The plaintiff claims that Karen, who she admits was a co-owner of Wild Wildlife, destroyed a lock on a gate, destroyed the gate itself, office property, broke into the office, broke into her desk, and then stole something from there. She claims that she needed to bring this mysterious other person with a lock cutter to do so. She claims that an alarm was set off and that the police responded in addition to the plaintiff herself. But what the plaintiff can't do is prove to you that any word of her story is true. She's produced no police report saying that the police actually did respond to an alarm at that time and arrived on the scene to an alleged break-in. She's offered you no security report showing that an alarm was set off at any time. The plaintiff claims that the sole copy of the will that she claims existed, which left money to her and her mother, we'll get to that in a second, was in that lockbox. And yet she didn't demand that the officers take that lockbox that she just apparently witnessed Karen steal. Karen destroy property to access? Members of the jury, when we look at the story, it does not add up. Yes, Karen did one evening go take that lockbox from that office, but she didn't break in. She didn't cut any locks like the plaintiff showed you. She didn't destroy any gate. She wouldn't need to. She was an owner of wild wildlife by the plaintiff's own admission. She would never need to nor want to actually destroy property to get in. The plaintiff's story does not add up because it is not true. It's made up to cover up something after the fact. And let's talk about the will now for a second, which the plaintiff claims isn't important at all to the story, but it is. It's actually essential. It's essential whether the will that the plaintiff claimed was actually in that lockbox or the will that Ms. Baja produced for you and the one that actually let her inherit from Lou Donaldson is the real one. That's what the motive is. The plaintiff said on the stand that the will that she believes existed disappeared. There are no copies of it. It doesn't exist. No one had left any copies for safekeeping, certainly not her. And not only did that will that she claims existed leave 25% of Lou's entire estate to her, it left 25% of Lou's estate to her mother, a woman that Lou Donaldson wasn't even married to, his ex-wife. It seems very convenient that on the stand, when the plaintiff's claiming what the legitimate will is, well, it seemingly disappeared. It had no copies ever made, and it left half of Lou's entire estate, not just to the plaintiff, but also to the plaintiff's mother. You heard from two experts. You heard from one expert about the authenticity of this will. Ms. Renard has 20 years of experience investigating wills just like this. And she told you that after she examined everything, it was authentic. It was genuine. Ms. Baja didn't forge anything. And she has every reason to be honest with you. Because unlike the plaintiff's expert, Ms. Pride, Ms. Renard was not hired by Karen. The plaintiff specifically hired Ms. Pride 1 month before the deadline to declare Lou legally dead, to come and tell you exactly this, exactly what she told you, to tell you that it was a murder, to tell you that her investigation concludes that Karen did wrong. That's what she was hired to do. Ms. Renard was tasked by her employer to try to come to the exact same conclusion that Ms. Pride did. She couldn't. After doing a thorough investigation, after looking at all the signatures, talking to multiple witnesses, talking to the police themselves, she could not conclude that a murder occurred. She could not conclude that the will was forged. Everything was okay, even though she had every reason to come to the same conclusion that Ms. Pride did. And now let's talk about the evidence in this case, or I should say the lack of any. The plaintiff has provided you with no physical evidence of any kind suggesting that there was any foul play that led to Lou's disappearance. They presented you with no DNA evidence whatsoever that was found on a meat grinder, that was found on the Karen herself, that was found on a lockbox, that was found anywhere at Wild Wildlife at all, or in Karen and Lou's home. They provided you with no police reports of any kind that suggest that Karen was actually a suspect in there. And they tasked that simply to the fact that apparently Karen and the police are in cahoots. Why? There is no reason for the police to help stage and cover up this murder. Without any physical evidence whatsoever, with the absolute absence of any evidence whatsoever, physical evidence or otherwise, that this occurred, the only way that the plaintiff's story makes any sense is if Ms. Baja has the technical skills and proficiency of a professional hit woman. She somehow cleaned everything up so nobody found it, and she somehow was able to convince the police to go along with it. It does not, the plaintiff hasn't even offered you a logical motive for why Karen Baja would do something like this. By the plaintiff's own admission, if that other will that she says existed in that lockbox did exist, Lou left money to his ex-wife. left a lot of it, $1.25 million to be exact. And the plaintiff has presented you with no evidence at all that even if Lou actually did plan to pursue this divorce, that he planned to carry out a different plan with this divorce than his other one. That he didn't plan to leave Karen anything by way of alimony, by way of marital property, to leave her in the will. Members of the jury, the story doesn't add up. They have not been able to provide you with any evidence to actually fill the countless plot holes and unanswered questions that this story they offer you is legitimate. Why has there been no money in that bank statement? You know what? Maybe just like all his planes that no one knew about, he had another bank statement. That he has another bank account that no one knows about too, and he's using that one. Or maybe he crashed over open water, but the burden wasn't on us. The burden was on them to prove to you that the explanation for what happened was that Miss Baja killed Lou Donaldson. We all want answers for what happened. But Karen Baja does not owe the plaintiff anything. We ask that you find Miss Baja not liable.
Thank you, Mr. New. Mr. Ayers, any rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
May it please the court. Now, in their closing argument, the defense just made a big deal about that lockbox. They told you that the defendant was a co-owner. Why would she break in? But they also admitted that she took it. They admitted that she took the lockbox from her husband's office. And in doing so, they leave a key question unanswered. Why? If she thought her husband was alive, why would she take that lockbox? And if she thought her husband was dead, how would she know? The only way that she could know that her husband was never coming back is if she killed him. When Lou Donaldson threatened divorce, the defendant made him disappear. Find her liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. The court will take the case under advisement. Just want to briefly give our jurors a moment to, if any of you did not document a team name or an advocate name or a side of the case, now is your last chance to get it. We're going to wrap up this trial here in about the next 30 seconds, so if you have a question, please feel free to put on your camera or microphone to clarify those details. Obviously not a question about the case. That's for your private deliberations. Just want to congratulate all of the participants this evening, as well as your coaches. Obviously a tremendous amount of work went into this trial and preparation, and I think it was an enjoyable one, certainly from my perspective to watch, having seen quite a few of these over the years. So fortunately, with the electronic ballots, you're not subjected to hours of critical feedback from your judges. So you can look forward to getting perhaps some written comments that we may submit with our ballots. But seeing that no one has decided to chime in and express concern over anyone's name or team code or side of the case, I'll simply say thank you all, congratulations, and good luck the rest of the way throughout the Summit Cup.
Thank you so much.